Painting my bedroom here. Just a sort of a video response to a few comments that I've been exchanging with Frostwork Bouquet on Glynos's video. Concerning essentially mortality and our reaction to it. Mortality could mean any number of things. We're mortal in that we can be killed by violence or by disease or by other things, or our bodies will eventually just conk out in the normal course of time. And we seem to have an aversion to this. And a lot of people seem to think that the will to life is ultimately sort of an end in itself, or perhaps the only end in our existence. We exist simply because we are somehow programmed by evolution or by some other larger force, some other larger principle or whatever you want to call that, that has made us this way. We were sort of brought in, sort of, as it were, predetermined to not want to die, full stop. We just don't want to die. Now, all kinds of questions are raised there, and I think a lot of people read Darwin that way, and I think that that's what a great deal of, would you call it popular anthropology or popular science even, imputes to evolution and everything. This idea of life in and of itself is what we struggle for. The struggle to survive, the struggle to dominate, the struggle to pass on our DNA, the struggle to breed, the struggle to find strong mating partners, etc., is motivated by nothing more than our fear of death or our will to life. End of story. All right. Maybe. I won't say that we don't have a fear of death or we don't have a will to life, but what I'm questioning is the why of it. A lot of people just say that the will to life just is, and it's a brute fact, and that's it, and we can't come up with anything else, so that must be the right one so far. The issues that I have with that is, first of all, it implies that there is one will, one reason to get out of bed every morning, and one reason to fear death. I'm not so sure about that. I think it might be clear, it might be obvious that almost all humans fear death and almost all humans seek life, a continuation of life, even on a completely irrational level. Or at least, I shouldn't say irrational, but on a completely, not in terms of robotic motivation, stimulus response action, but they may fear other things. My father once told me a story about when he was on an aircraft that suddenly hit clear air turbulence, and particularly nasty clear air turbulence is terrifying. It scares even seasoned flight attendants and things like that. It's when the plane suddenly leaps up a couple of thousand feet or drops a couple of thousand feet. And it's not that dangerous, but it's just really unnerving because it comes up out of nowhere. And all the blood rushes out of your head or into your head, depending on the direction that you're going. And a lot of people say, well, this is it at that moment. It's a fleeting thing, but it's a common occurrence on board aircraft in that situation. I felt it myself. And he said what he most missed was the idea that, oh, I'll never be able to take my grandson fishing. I'll never be able to, all the things that he will have missed out on life. The stereotypical, my whole life flashed before my eyes, and I evaluated my life and where it was going and how I'd lived it. Not a sense of terror, but a sense of sadness. Now, you could say that that is fear of death, but is it? It's just perhaps sadness at the ineluctability of the onrush of death. He did not in that moment fear the cessation of existence in and of itself, but he feared the deprivation that would result from him not existing. He feared being deprived of all the good things in life. Now, fear of deprivation of good things is not the same thing as fear of that which is horrible. If I'm not starving to death, and I still don't want somebody to take my nice juicy hamburger from me, let's say I'm just hungry and I know I can get another hamburger, but I got to walk across the street to the restaurant to get one. I might resist someone's attempt to take that hamburger from me. You could say that I fear having that hamburger, being deprived of that hamburger. But if I'm starving to death, I may fear having that hamburger taken from me in a more true sense than in the first case. It may actually be, I fear, purely negative repercussions of being deprived of the hamburger. Whereas if, in the first instance, where I still will resist someone taking my hamburger, One could say that I fear being deprived of the pleasure of having this hamburger. Motivation is funny that way. There's positive and negative motivation. And I'm not sure that we can say that one or the other is the strongest drive. I think it's fair to say again that we all have some sort of desire to survive. Yes, that seems more or less indisputable, but not for absolutely everybody and everything, but it seems to hold over time. It's the why of it that I'm not so sure. There's any number of reasons that we would seek to exist. Schopenhauer says the will to life, Nietzsche says the will to power, Frankl says the will to meaning, etc. All these different wills. What is it? One thing for sure, all the other ones apart from the will to life in and of itself assumes that we want to stay alive because there are things that we want to do, and being alive is the necessary precondition for doing all those things. Whereas only Schopenhauer seems to say that the will to life is an end in and of itself. It just is. Schopenhauer's version simply strikes me in its sureness, I suppose, or in its categoricalness, or even Nietzsche, you could say this. He seems to say, although he implies otherwise elsewhere, that the will to power is what motivates everything. But again, when you think about the enormous implications of amor fati, which he I wouldn't say he recommends, but he says he wants to follow himself. That essentially he wants to completely alter reality to the point where, or his perception of reality to the point where he actually loves everything that ever happens. He says he wants to be a yes-sayer to everything. That kind of cuts across the will to power, and sort of challenges it, I think. And in that sense, I think that Nietzsche is kind of saying that there's more than one desire that we have out there, or we have the potential for other desires. In fact, one could say that we have the will to love. He's essentially saying, I want to have the will to love. I want to have love. I want to love reality in and of itself. I want to love everything that I can't change about reality. And my sort of view of the mechanics of the survival mechanism are sort of a lot more skeptical, I suppose, than any actual attempt to say this is how it is. A lot of people read Darwin saying that it's simply the struggle to survive, the struggle to pass on one's DNA. I don't see it that way at all. I say that we all struggle to survive, yes, but the why of it is up to us to decide. How do I determine something else's motivation? I think it's a bit insane to say that I know something else's motivation better than it does. And the very idea that there is one motivation that fits everything, or that fits almost everything, or that we can use as a general yardstick is, well, I hate to say it, but it's faith. It's the idea that there are fundamental truths out there. It's the idea that there is one principle behind everything, which I simply don't believe. Or if there is one different principle, it has to be experienced at the individual level. And if I say that I fear death, what does that mean? It doesn't mean that I fear death because I fear being dead. That's the interesting thing about the Benatarian asymmetry that I just made a video on. Benatar seems to say that we do fear death. He deals with that in his book, but he doesn't seem to explain why we fear death. In his own calculus, the fear of death is fundamentally irrational, because he's saying that it's better never to have lived. Okay, so if we knew that, if we take him at his word and say that it's better never to have been, what's the fear of death? It's got to be better than this. So there is no actual reason to fear death at all. Again, the assumption is we just do because that's the way we are. Faith, religion, dogma. No, thank you.